Hello, everyone. Welcome to this Soil CRC webinar and welcome to National Agriculture Day. Good day to be celebrating agriculture as shown in our lovely pictures behind us. My name is Catherine Allen. I'm the program lead for program one of the Soil CRC. So today's our third webinar in a series of three from program one about communicating risks and rewards. Before we get into that, we acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands on which we're coming to you from today in this virtual space. We acknowledge the traditional custodians of the various lands on which you're all joining from today. So I pay my respects to the elders, past and present, and extend that respect to celebrate the rich and cultural diversity of all First Nations people here today and with whom we work and live. I would also like to introduce the two speakers that we have today. We have two speakers, Simon Kruger, who is the Project Communications Officer of the West Midlands Group, Farmer Group in Western Australia. He's leading all CRC projects and he works directly with growers and stakeholders to ensure that the research findings from here and other research is translated into clear, practical outcomes and adapted at farm level. So he's really well placed to be presenting this seminar today. And if you've come to some of the previous ones, you will have met them. You won't have met Joy Valle. Joy is the Executive Officer of the Corrigin Farm Improvement Group, another group from Western Australia. The local group driven, covering the Western Australian shires of Corrigin, Bruce Rock, Narrabeen, Condinin and Culin. The group are well experienced in hosting extension events and collaborating in the agricultural research community. And Joy's going to be playing tag with Simon. Simon will explain the project. Joy will provide some real world examples. Before we get to that, the Soil CRC, I'll give you a little bit of a background just in case you're not familiar with it. Yeah. It's a collaboration of farmers, industry and scientists, 39 partners across Australia, 8 universities, 4 government agencies, 7 industry partners, but really importantly, for today's presentation, 20 grower groups. The Soil CRC delivers research that helps farmers improve their soil performance and increase their productivity and profitability. We've had 10 years funding from 2017, finishing in 2027. In all, about $70 million in cash, $120 million in kind, which makes it the largest collaborative research effort in Australia's history. There's our major partners. We say thank you to all of them. Program 1, there's 4 programs in the Soil CRC. Program 1 has projects focused on the human context in which soil science happens. So all the research in Program 1 is collaborative. It's built on interactions among farmer groups and university researchers and industry. We have research in 3 related areas around the economics, norms and practices that influence decision making at the farm scale, around market and policy, advocating in particular for institutional arrangements that best promote and support soil stewardship, and a whole lot of work around knowledge and wisdom about soil and its management and how it can be supported and shared. And that's what today's webinar relates to, this third area. In particular, it's about practical tools and approaches for effective knowledge sharing and using knowledge from the Soil CRC. But also it showcases how collaboration facilitates rigorous, relevant research. And we're really highlighting the central role of the bridging institutions such as farmer groups and advisors. I know many of you on the list are advisors, work with advising people. This is really celebrating that bridging role. Some housekeeping. The recording of this will be available at the Soil CRC Knowledge Hub, and we'll type those into the chat as well. Your cameras are off, your microphones are muted. If they're not, please do that. Two ways of communicating. If you have questions, please put them in the Q&A box. That way people can uptick them, questions up to the top. I'll read them out at the end of this session. If you want to talk, if you want to say what, acknowledge the country you're on, talk about National Agriculture Day, any of these things, use the chat box. That's where you can chat if you're not actually asking a question. This should finish in about 60 minutes from now, including the Q&A and discussion. And at the end of the webinar, there'll be a short survey. We hopefully will have more webinars, more information sharing, so we value your insights. But remember, questions into the Q&A box, chat in the chat. That's enough from me until it's question time. I'm going to hand over to Simon Kruger to take you through the rest of the seminar. Thanks, Simon.
Thanks a lot, Catherine. Much appreciated. So good morning to everyone, I guess, and thanks for joining a webinar 3 in the Soil CRC series. Obviously, as Catherine's just introduced, my name's Simon Kruger. I'm the Project Communications Officer at the West Midlands Group. We're a grower group that's based in Dandaragan, Western Australia. It's about 2 hours north of Perth, for those of you not in Western Australia. WMG West Midlands Group, we're the project lead for the Risk Reward Tool project, which is where today's webinar stems from. In particular, today we're looking at how to communicate risks and rewards more clearly through the writing guide, which is produced as the key output of this project. And so what I want to do first is just to give you an outline of how today is going to run. And so my plan is we'll start out with an overview of the Risk Reward Tool project to give you some context and to set the scene as to how we came about with the writing guide. Then in section 2, I'll give you a break from listening to me for a minute and we'll look at some examples. And I've got Joy Valle of Corrigin Farm Improvement Group joining us to talk about their involvement in the project and to run through how they've been using the guide in their organisation. Once we're done with a couple of examples, we'll move into section 3 and I'll give a high level walkthrough of the guide itself, obviously understanding that we've got, an hour here today. And finally, we'll finish with question time, which will be moderated by Catherine, as she said. So without further ado, I'll get into it. So starting off with the project particulars. This project is affectionately titled Soil CRC Project PJA 1.4.005, or the Risk Reward Tool Project for us. I believe this was the first project in the Soil CRC to be led by a grower group. And to me, that really demonstrates the confidence the Soil CRC has in the abilities and importance of grower groups, just as Catherine had noted before, and also the level of support that they're willing to provide us to get projects like this off the ground and support us to deliver them. The project obviously ran from 2022 into 2024, with the writing guide being released earlier in this year, so 2025. As I mentioned before, West Midlands Group were the lead, and we were ably supported by our friends at Corrigin Farm Improvement Group, Central West Farming Systems in Condobolin in New South Wales, and Charles Sturt University as project partners. While there are technical reports and fact sheets produced for this project, as with all Soil CRC projects, the major output, like I've noted before, from this work is the Risk Reward Tool Writing Guide. So what I wanted to do here is, before we get into the project aim itself, I'd like to make a note here of why we needed this project and why WMG and Nathan Craig pushed to get this project up in 2021, 2022. So for us, we see it very easily. Farmers are making increasingly complex decisions every year, And they're doing this in an environment of information overload. So they're getting information from more than 7+ sources, we found in multiple surveys before, and it's all coming in different formats. So research is often fragmented, technical, and difficult to apply sometimes. And then in that space, reporting formats vary widely across grower groups, and the quality of communication really does shape the adoption of new technologies, innovations, etc. And so this is the space that we wanted to work in. During our survey process for this project, one of our farmers summed it up pretty well, and I've put the quote up there. And he said, "Simon, farming's getting more and more risky. We're talking big decisions and even bigger dollars each year." And so that's the problem we set out to address. We want to ensure farmers have clear, decision-ready information that helps them weigh up risk and reward. And we do that hopefully through the writing guide. I'd also like to highlight here, again, I'm biased in this space, so maybe I do bang on about it a bit, but grower groups are central to this project because they're the trusted conduit between research and farmers. So this tool, it wasn't designed to bypass groups, it was designed to support the next users, so these grower groups, etc. And groups like WMG, Corrigin Farm Improvement Group, and Central West Farming Systems don't just deliver information. We interpret it and we translate it for a local context for our farmers, and that's a really important role. And so this project was designed with that role in mind, and with the consideration that amongst these groups, there's also a relatively high staff turnover and increasing expectations from these organisations, from funding bodies and so on, to demonstrate this kind of stuff. So just wanted to make a note of that and big up grower groups as per usual. Now, I'm just going to go over the risk reward tool project aim here. And so the aim of the project was pretty straightforward, and that's to develop a practical evidence-based tool that supports clearer communication of risk and reward to farmers. And so at the initial project inception meeting, the team workshopped multiple areas of ideas of what a risk reward tool might look like. And as usual, that got kind of carried away. And we thought, could it be a choice kind of style website with reviews on it? Could it be like a decision support tool? Maybe it could be a rating system, like a ANCAP system or something, or possibly it got carried away and said it could be an app that farmers could use. But being realistic, what we landed on was the concept of a practical evidence-based reporting and writing guide. We wanted a framework that any farming systems group, a researcher, or a communicator could use to help them, write better, or communicate better, communicate more effectively rather than better. And so we didn't want to make just another website or a widget that would gather dust or not get used. And so as grower group leads and representatives, we thought a practical guide grounded in how farmers think and how grower groups already work would not only be useful, but also achievable within the project timeline. And so we thought the tool we should create should help farmers weigh up risk and reward quickly and credibly, and at the same time, help grower groups and science communicators communicate research in different formats that not only match how decisions are made on farm, but also taking into account the different learning styles and stages of awareness and adoption that farmers are on. And so as a little note from myself, I come from a user interface and experience design background. It's the degree I've got at uni, which is maybe unusual for agriculture, but that's what I have. And I wanted to bring some of that design thinking to this project. And so we treated this project a bit like a design-based project. And so that's, iterative, user-tested, and grounded in a lot of feedback and evidence. And so throughout the project, we followed a structured design process broken up into several stages. First, a scanning of existing report formats. Then we carried out a survey of 60 farmers across the 3 grower groups to understand their attitudes to risk and reward. Next, we did the completion of a grower group matrix and SWOT analysis, and this was to understand the limitations in current reporting formats and processes. Then we moved into the development of the initial prototypes of the reporting formats and the writing guide. And finally, multiple rounds of user testing with farmers and continued refinement. So this was taking these out to farmers, getting them to look at it, break it, and then bring it back, and then making those changes. The end result of this process was that every part of the final writing guide is shaped by user feedback, be that next users like grower group staff or end users like our participating farmers in the project. So onto these farmer survey findings. This is very high level here, obviously in the time constraints. From the 60 farmers across WMG, CFIG and Central West farming systems, a clear message emerged. First, before adopting anything new, farmers really want solid context, where the work was done, what the seasonal conditions were, whether it applies to their soil and operations were key. Economics also played a central part, not just capital cost, but also operating costs, return on investments, worst case outcomes, etc. So they want transparent discussion of both risks and potential rewards as well. So both are equally important. Farmers also talked a lot about practical effort, so labour, logistics, machinery fit, timing required, and they want realistic descriptions, not just glossy summaries. And on that point, evidence matters too. So proven results, farmer examples, local trials, photos of real paddocks and people were all indicated as important considerations or additions to any decision-making scenario for a farmer. All of this survey data was analysed by Mark Frost at Charles Sturt University, and this helps shape the structure of the risk-reward tool, and it's why the writing guide emphasises clarity, context, suitability, transparency, and a balanced view of risk and reward. So from the survey process, it was also evident that farmers defined risk broadly. It wasn't just financial, it included agronomic and environmental uncertainty. Reward also wasn't just yield, which is often a focus. It also included return on investment. It included efficiency gains. And on top of that, it also included stewardship. So feeling like you've done the right thing, doing the right thing. Decision making in and of itself was also multi-layered. So farmers use advisors, peers, grower groups, agronomists, family, and their own experience to make decisions. They're not anti-technology. They just simply wanted to avoid uncertainty. And so importantly, we saw a strong regional difference in risk appetite in the surveys as well between different growing regions, which is not unusual. An example I can pull up from mind is that CFIG farmers tended to prioritise risk first, and WMG farmers were probably more balance or reward orientated. And this might have something to do to speculate that in Corrigin, frost, a little bit more marginal, a bit more variable. So they have a bit more, probably a bit less risk tolerance. In the West Midlands region, higher rainfall, and it's considered a slightly, easier for want of a better word, place to farm. And so we looked at maybe the reward a little bit more there. So overall, the broader understanding of risk and reward drawn from the survey process is reflected in how the writing guide and the reporting templates are actually structured. This is quite a complex piece of paper, a slide here, and I don't expect you guys to read it. It was just as an example of what a grower group's matrix analysis looks like. In a nutshell, each of the participating groups had an in-depth and critical look at their current reporting formats, their processes, and the quality, and thinking about areas that could be improved. And so the grower group matrix analysis showed us which sections of reports that farmers are getting, what they actually use, and which they tend to ignore, as well as to provide the team with an idea of what current practice in reporting looked like for the involved grower groups, as well as where there was room for improvement or inclusion. Without going into too much detail, it probably comes as no surprise to most of you that the results, economics, and discussion sections carried the most decision weighting from the farmers, but were often defined as the most difficult sections to complete. Apologies. Most difficult sections to complete for grower groups, and were variable in quality across the groups as well. As with the survey results, this matrix again shaped the structure of the reporting formats we would work on in the project. but it also gave us a validation for the development and importance of the writing guide in and of itself. And so with the guidance from the survey and the matrix analysis, the project settled on 3 key reporting formats. And so that's the infographic, the synthesis report, and the full report. And so each of these formats matched a different decision stage for farmers: awareness, evaluation, and trialling and adoption. And all of these 3 formats are supported by the risk reward tool writing guide. And rather than go into it straight away, I'll get into it in more detail on the formats and the writing guide in section 3 of today's webinar. The final phase of the project obviously was producing each of the infographic, synthesis report and full report formats, and then taking them out to our farmers, participating farmers, to critique them, break them, and provide us with lots of useful feedback. I'd like to make a note here again about the iterative design process that I talked about before and that we went through with this project, and that comes from the design thinking process. We tested these formats over 3 rounds with grower group staff and representative farmers. So making change, sending it out, blind testing, bringing it back, making the changes, going out, testing again with different farmers, coming back, making the changes, so on. And so each round produced specific feedback, whether that was like clearer headings, change the format on the infographic, do shorter blocks of text, remove this from the synthesis report because it's not necessary, clearer comparisons, maybe more detail in the full report, and so on. And those are the kinds of feedback that we got from our farmers. And so with each of these rounds, we refined the formats accordingly, and we put our learnings into the writing guide itself. And so this is all captured in the writing guide. And so we get to the key output of the project, and that is the risk reward tool writing guide and user documentation, or I'll call it writing guide. And so after the scoping, the surveys, the matrix analysis, reporting format development, user testing, and finally the refinement stages of the project, we get to the key output. Again, this is the risk reward tool writing guide. It's a practical, adaptable tool designed for people communicating and extending research to a farmer audience, and probably the main thing most of you guys are here today to learn about. And so now you've got to look. I've given you a bit of a really high level overview of the risk reward tool project and what that looked like. And before I get into the writing guide and going into that in a little more detail, I thought it would be a good idea to break up my presentation with some examples of how other groups have been using the risk reward tool project and the risk reward tool writing guide itself. And so now I'd like to introduce Joy Valle, who is our good friend and Executive Officer at the Corrigin Farm Improvement Group, or CFIG. I just want to note here before Joy jumps in as well that CFIG were one of our key collaborators on the project, and they've carried out a significant amount of user testing with the farmers and have since built the guide into their everyday work. And I really appreciate Joy being here today and obviously for CFIG's involvement in the project in general. So I'll hand over to Joy now to share CFIG's experiences across the risk reward tool project and how they've been utilising the guide since. Thanks a lot, Joy.
Thank you, Simon. So as you mentioned, we have had a fair bit of experience using the risk reward tool process at the moment. So being a producer group, we cover quite a large area. As Catherine mentioned earlier, we cover the Shire of Corrigin, Coolin, Condinin, Bruce Rock, Narrabeen and Corrigin. So we have quite a variety of soil types, different rainfall, different areas. So we border some low and some high rainfall areas, as well as, generally speaking, we're in a medium rainfall area. So we've got a lot of different projects and we need to get a lot of different information out to our producers. And having our main charter or our vision to really provide the latest agricultural research and information to our farmers and the local community, if we're not getting the information out there correctly or in the right format, we're technically, can be failing in what we're doing. So we've found implementing this process and the risk reward tools are a very valuable part of what we're doing. So thanks, Simon. We'll jump to the next slide. So we've got projects that might cover soil amelioration, maximising fallow rotations, stubble height and ground cover, carbon sequestration, water use efficiency. So having a whole range of different topics when we go to do the reporting. It's very hard to find a conclusive and succinct way to get that across to people. So what you can see on the screen at the moment is one of the infographic tools that was developed through the project. Along with this, we've been using the whole process for developing the full report. So we end up with a technical report that's suitable for scientists to read, or, the different target audiences that we might have. We've developed a 4-pager reporting process as well through this project, and we ended up transitioning that across to a Canva template as well. So we've got the infographic, 4 pages, the full reports, and we can use these across all of our extension platforms. So we have an infographic template for Facebook, for LinkedIn, for Twitter, Instagram, and then we've also got a formatted 4-pager template that we use, and we can apply that to any projects. And then we can also extend that further. So the way that we link information to our website, it's all going to be properly branded. It's very clear. Again, we're targeting different audiences. So 70% of our farmers might prefer to have a look at this infographic, and they can directly see what the risks and the rewards are of the projects, what the economic outcomes are, what the production outcomes are, and then they can weigh up whether or not they want to go and look at the 4-pager. The feedback that we've been getting from the committee and from farmers is that they really love to be able to just get a quick snapshot. They don't really have time to go and read a full-page technical report. So we're finding it very beneficial for the different target audiences. But also, I'll get you to jump ahead, thanks, Simon. Within our organisation as well, we're finding really good benefits for the team. So if we have a project officer that's just starting to work with us, that may be at university or just finishing university, they've got a proper process and procedure to follow to help them draft reports and get them set out in the right way, but then also the process to follow to then extract that information. And then if we've got very high-level agricultural scientists that we're working with or work with us, it also assists them to extract the right information and put it into this infographic. So the farmers get a brief snapshot. They're not swamped with technical jargon that they can't understand. So it's really a double-edged sword in that way. We're targeting the different audiences that we want, but our whole team is actually benefiting from this process and procedure. And we ended up going from using it on one initial project, and we've now developed the full reports, 4 pages, infographics, and social media for over 9 projects that we've recently finished and finalised. So we've found it absolutely fantastic in that way, that it's helped us get all of the correct information together that we need and put it out through multiple channels. So we've found it fantastic, and a big thank you to the West Midlands group and the Soil CRC for helping us get this happening for our region.
Excellent. Thanks so
Thanks,
much for
Simon.
the investment, Joy. Great to have you on board to give everyone a good idea of how they might utilize the guide and give us a good wrap at the same time. It's much appreciated. For myself, what really stands out about CFIG, use of the guide is how they've really adapted it to their system and to their team and their processes, and how adaptable it's been. So they've obviously used it across multiple projects this year. And it's not only been used for reporting and stuff, it's been used as a process and also helpful for onboarding staff. And I guess my point, I will reiterate the entire way through this, or if you ever talk to me about the risk reward tool, this project and the writing guide, is that's exactly how it's intended to work. It's flexible and fit for purpose, and it's a tool in the toolbox, not necessarily a toolbox itself. I also thought it would be cool here to quickly show everyone, and this has only come to me very recently, another quick example from Air EP, so Grower Group. If anyone doesn't know, Grower Group based in Eyre Peninsula in South Australia, also Soil CRC partners, and we have worked with Air EP in several Program 1 projects, but they weren't actually involved in the risk reward tool project, but they're now looking at how the guide might support their extension work, particularly in their Soil CRC extension packages project and their extension of Soil CRC outputs. And so this infographic was produced by the Air EP team, and this is a shout out obviously to Amy and Rebecca for your excellent work. And it just shows how they've utilised the guide and adapted the infographic format with a little bit more detail, but to produce their own content on their own projects outside of the risk reward tool project itself. And so yeah, I was pretty stoked when Rebecca shared this with me, just because I didn't. I hadn't seen it yet, and I didn't realize that they were using the infographic format for what they were doing. So this was, pretty exciting to see how they've utilized it to create something like this as well. And so now that you've heard the backstory of the risk reward project and why this guide exists, and then you've heard from Joy and seen a couple of examples of how it's been utilized, what I'm going to do is focus on something a little bit more practical. My aim in this section of the presentation is to give you a clear sense of how to actually use the writing guide, how it fits in with the way farmers learn about new practices, get new information, and how you can adapt it to suit your own organisation's processes or needs. A really important point that I want to make up front as well, that I've kind of slightly made so far, is that the guide is not prescriptive. It's a flexible framework that slots into whatever system your group already works with, and it's something we hope to keep evolving as different groups use it. So a quick recap: the guide has three main purposes, I guess: to support clear farmer-centered reporting, to encourage consistent communication of risk and reward, and to be adaptable across different projects and audiences. It helps farmers assess risk and reward by presenting information in formats that match their decision-making process, clearly outlining the practical benefits, financial implications, and potential downsides and upsides of new practices, so that they can judge whether it's a fit for their business. At the same time, the dual purpose is that it gives communicators, researchers, and extension staff and professionals just a structured way to distill complex research into specific risk, reward, and system fit details that farmers say they need the most. So it's a guide in that sense. I've noted that the Soil CRC risk reward tool writing guide is available from the Soil CRC Knowledge Hub. You can scan the QR code here on the screen now and grab it, and you can follow along in this section if you'd like to as well. That's probably how I'll treat it. So yeah, get yourself a copy up and follow along if you'd like to do that, if you'd like to look in a bit of detail as we go. So first of all, I'll talk about how the guide is structured. The guide is split up into two parts, I guess the easiest way to go about it. Part one is about choosing the right format. So whether you should be thinking about using the infograph, if that's more appropriate, or whether you should think about using the full report because of where you're at or what information you've got, whether you should use a synthesis report. And so it's guidance around how you choose that right format and what that format might be best suitable for based on the findings from the risk reward tool project. And then part 2 of the guide is slightly larger again, and this is about writing each section of a full report, or each section that's going to be utilized in each 3 of the formats in the best way possible, the most effective way possible from our learnings. And so one of the strongest insights from the project was that farmers move through a predictable learning pathway when weighing up a new practice. And so that comes up as an awareness level first, where is this information even relevant to me? And so I guess that's where the infographic fits, because should be able to tell that straight away. And then there's the evaluation kind of phase, and that's like, oh, could this work here on my farm? So that's where the synthesis report fits in. And then finally, the trialing and adoption phase, if we want to call it trialing and adoption. And that's what exactly do I need to know to be able to to carry this out, to do this work, to implement this new piece of technology or innovation or research, etc. And so the guide maps each stage to a specific report format, whether that be the infographic, the synthesis report, and the full report. And then part 2 of the guide, when it's talking about each of the sections, it shows how that is appropriate to each of those formats as well. And so, first of all, you've already seen a few examples of the infographic format from CFIG and Area P already in the last section of the webinar. And I'd have to say this format has been the most popular, I guess, for want of a better word, with both the other grower groups that have used the writing guide, but also with our farmer audience. And I'll echo what Joy noted earlier, that we've had a lot of success with the infographic format from our farmers, and they really are pretty keen to get just the right information on a single page as possible. And they like pictures, and they like seeing it set out in a really easy way like this, where it respects their time and yeah. So again, most popular of all the formats. So the infographic is best placed as an awareness format document, or an awareness document. So at this stage, farmers want the quickest possible sense of what's in it for me. The infograph it's not a document to give detail, but rather to attract the reader and then progress them further to the evaluation phase. So there's enough information for them to understand what the research is about, what the project is about, etc., and is this for me? And throughout our user testing, farmers repeatedly said that the first thing that they look for is a nice central image or a big image on there, or at least some graphs. So they look for pictures first, followed by a quick scan of the risks and rewards. And then they often also ask about the context. And I think the context is an important thing as well, because in refinement of the infographics as well, there's been a lot of feedback saying that it's important to note, exactly where the research was done, what the rainfall was like, what the soil type was like, because those kinds of things are really important straight away for a farmer to say, you're right, this makes sense for my operation. It's there to provide quick awareness for farmers. It's one page, visual, it's written in plain English. It includes context, key results, a risk statement, a reward statement, and the opportunity to address sustainability as well. Next on is the synthesis report format, and this is best placed from our work on the project as an evaluation document. And so this is where farmers want enough detail to decide whether it's worth deeper consideration. And they need a little bit more data in there as well. So from our user testing, many farmers are happy stopping at the synthesis report, saying things like, and this is a quote, I wouldn't want to invest any more time in reading more than 4 or 5 pages, so you've got the number just right. But they still want to understand the core results and implications and get that extra bit of detail that they might not have got from the infographic or from their awareness level of it. And so you might like to choose this format as the middle ground. So it has enough depth for serious interest without overwhelming detail, maybe for like a blog post or like on your website or something along those lines. And there's always the consideration here of, so what for my farm? And so this synthesis report needs to bring its results back to practical decisions. And so that's a definite focus for the synthesis report. And then finally, we've got the mother document, so to speak, or the full report format. And this is the one that goes into most detail in the writing guide. The full report format it maps up when farmers it maps up to when farmers are probably getting into the trialing and adoption kind of phase, I guess. The full report's the reference document or the record. It's usually long, detailed, and includes fine-grained data in user testing. Sorry, apologies. In user testing, our farmers were most familiar with this format. Like, this is a format that grower groups probably use more often, or research comes out more often. And this format, and they described it as valuable for validating assumptions and checking the hard numbers, even if it was more suited to the more research-focused individuals or those who want really fine detail. And so again, hark back to my last comment about the 4 or 5 pages. Sometimes our full reports end up being 25, 40 pages long. And again, it's about thinking about what to include and what not to include and what's most important. I really want to reiterate here, though, that it's important that the full report format is essential. And most of you will be obviously completing a full report for your projects or research anyway. But it carries the full transparency of your work, so the methods, economics, assumptions. And so anyone that's reading it can trace how conclusions were drawn. Not only that, it often provides most of the content that can be refined further down and utilized in the synthesis report and the infographic formats. And so having the full report written as best as possible, utilizing the writing guide, makes doing a synthesis report or an infographic that much easier, because you've got good detail right there and you can pick and pull from it. Before I get into part 2 of the guide, the chunky bit, writing each section effectively, I think it's important to note that choosing the right format is a key consideration, and often starts with 3 questions that I've kind of turned into 5 here for some reason. And those questions are that you need to think about is: who is the audience? What decision are they making, and how much detail do they need? Starting with these kinds of questions and coming back to these questions keeps your reporting focused and keeps the work that you're producing focused as well. And so this is outlined further in the guide, and so I won't go into it further here, but just as a note to keep these kind of questions central whenever you're working through the guide. And so if you're playing along at home, what I've done here is I've got a section called Writing Each Section Well. And I've got the page numbers that these sections are on from the guide. So title and key messages, page 10 to 12, background, methodology, 12 to 14, results, 14 to 16, economics, 16 to 19, and discussion, 19 to 20. There's more than this in the guide itself, but I just wanted to pick a few to go through so you can see the kind of detail or a few key points that I can pull out so you can understand what you get from the guide if you're going through it. And so part 2 of the writing guide is more focused on how to actually write each section of the different formats well, in particular the full report format. Within the time constraints of the webinar, obviously, like I said, I'm not going to go through every single section in detail, but I'm just going to pull out a few key examples and work with them. So firstly, we've got titles and key messages. We start with the most important real estate in any document, the title and key messages. So a title is the reader's first impression. So think about coming up with a short, punchy title that captures attention. As an example, this project itself was originally called A New Tool to Better Assess the Risk and Reward of New Farming Practices and Technologies. And now it's just the Risk Reward Tool. And I guess this one's pretty self-explanatory, but still needs consideration. There's been too many times that I've seen a title of a report or a project that's 25 words long, and even I get bored halfway through reading that. And so if we're respecting a farmer's time, or trying to not include too much jargon and try and fit it on an infographic, a title on an infographic, try and keep it short and punchy and do your best in that sense. The key messages, on the other hand, are often a stop. These are really important. They're a stop-go point for farmers and should be particularly considered whenever you're working on them. A strong infographic or synthesis report opens with 3 or 4 clear dot points that answer simply, like, what was tested, what did we learn, and why does it matter for you? And that's in essence, that's the key messages. They're essentially a elevator pitch or a farmer digest. And they should be in plain language and directly relevant to the decisions the farmer is likely to make based on the information that you're providing them in that report. It's stop-go point in the sense that a farmer they'll decide when they hit that key messages right at the top there. They'll say, okay, well, this is for me. I'm going to read further. This suits me. Next is the background and methodology. So the background section sets a stage. So why is this topic important? What opportunity or problem does it link to? And what do we already know? So the background places your research in the context of other work and creates trust and credibility. Moving into the methodology from the background, the focus is on trust rather than detail. So the methodology should bridge the gap between your research and the practical application. So it's empowering farmers to understand, trust, and act upon your findings. And so they should be able to go back, and if they don't understand what's going on, look at the methodology and say, okay, so this is how they did it. I can replicate that. Farmers told us during user testing that if something in the results doesn't make sense, they jump back to the methodology to check how it was measured. A key point here, though, to note is that for infographics and sometimes synthesis report, but mostly infographics, background and methodology become 1 or 2 phrases inside the context box. It's, at an awareness stage, you don't need to bog people down with methodology and background information. Excuse me. But for full reports, it can be up to a page or more. This detail can be explored. Next is the results section, and this is where the writing guide probably adds the most value for communicators and researchers. It's a hefty section. The results section of any kind of report is the heart of it, and so it's the data that you've collected telling a story. Key reminders that we've included in the guide include to only include results that link to key messages, to use graphs for trends, tables for exact numbers, and to avoid surprise data that wasn't mentioned in your methodology. And of all things, the most important is to lead with the most impactful findings. And so when you're considering a synthesis document, you might not include all of the findings that you have in the full report if they're not the most impactful or not as important to what you're trying to address when you're writing that report. Next is the all-important economics section. And so as you'll find highlighted within the guide, economics are often the missing link in traditional reporting, yet they're one of the main tools that farmers use to assess adoptability. The writing guide outlines a clear partial budget approach that helps communicators present costs, benefits, and assumptions in a way that's easy for farmers to interpret and compare. I want to make a quick note here that this was the single biggest gap the project uncovered in traditional reporting formats and across the grower group analysis of current practice. The writing guide did have an initial economic analysis template that was attached to it. However, the template's been removed from this version. It's going to be further tested and refined by grower groups with support from economic researchers as part of the current extension packages or CRC project, which is still ongoing. And so hopefully you'll see a detailed webinar on this section in the near future. At the same time, with that said, an economic analysis is one of the main tools by which farmers assess the adoptability of a new practice. So we hear farmers asking about the dollars and cents. If a partial budget or even a high-level economic analysis can be included in any kind of reporting or any kind of infographic, etc., that you got dollars and cents can be included, it's incredibly useful for farmers. Finally, I'll jump into the discussion section. And this is where a report can really come to life, I guess. Up to this point, you've given the reader, aka a farmer, data, context, and numbers. But the discussion is where you help them make sense of it all. So farmers have consistently told us in the user testing that they want to understand what the findings actually mean for their business, not just what the results were. And so the discussion section is the bridge between what happened in the trial and what should I be thinking of if I'm considering adoption. And so think of this section as the interpretation, the practical meaning, and the implications. Start by stating the main takeaway, then walk through why the results occurred. Obviously, farmers are really clear that they want to understand system fit, so soil type, rainfall, timing, feasibility. So this is where you link everything back to practical application. You also really need to be open about limitations. And this actually builds trust because farmers are assessing risk and reward, and risk is obviously involved in that kind of limitations. And finally, I just want to note that offering conditions for success or areas for further work is important so that farmers can picture when this practice is likely to work and possibly when it's not. And so you can think of the discussion section as a place where the research becomes useful to the end user, so useful, most useful to the farmer. Just want to make a general note here on tone and language. And I thought this was important to include before we finish up. This is addressed throughout the writing guide, but I think in my experience, this kind of goes for almost all communications. Keep the tone and language that you use as plain and accessible as possible in all of your communications and extension endeavours with farmers. Avoid jargon, explain acronyms, and be balanced in describing both the risks and potential rewards. Transparency and talking about what didn't work builds trust. And it's so often I hear from our growers that they will learn more from the mistakes than they do from their successes. So these things really need to be clear in whatever we're trying to communicate and extend to our farmers. Finally, I want to emphasize again that the guide is not designed as a rigid template. It's not prescriptive. You use it where it fits. So far, I've seen groups using it as an onboarding tool for new staff, even as a refresher for some that might have been there for a while, merging different sections and formats together to match existing reporting templates that they've got for themselves. I've seen it used in planning, designing, and publishing completely new communications and extension material, and creating digital and physical workshop or even event-friendly versions of reports and more. Like we've used the infograph format as a single-page handout at a field walk that worked really well as well. So it's not just for digital spaces, it can be utilised elsewhere. And so overall, by aligning reporting and extension material with the way farmers evaluate new practices, the writing guide ensures that risks, rewards, and real-world implications are presented clearly and concisely at each stage of learning. It supports agricultural communicators and researchers to translate data into meaningful, farmer-focused messages that make trade-offs, profitability, and adoptability easy to understand. My final note will be that you've listened to me go over the guide at a pretty high level today. But the best thing you can possibly do now is get a copy of the writing guide and sit down and have a good read of it. And that's where you'll get even more information than you will on this. You can find the writing guide again on the Soil CRC Knowledge Hub. And by all means, if you'd like to discuss anything that I've talked about today at all, obviously you can see that I like talking, even more so if it's one-on-one. But give me an email, give me a call. Happy to chat about this in as much detail as you need and as much as I can offer. And a final thank you to our project partners, obviously Corrigin Farm Improvement Group, Central West Farming Systems, Charles Sturt University. I want to thank Nathan Craig and I want to thank Veronica Robinson as well. And to all the farmers who contributed their time and insights. Again, if you'd like to talk more about the guide and the project, I've popped my email and my mobile number on the left-hand side of the slide there. So thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you very much, Simon and Joy. That was fantastic.
No problems. My pleasure.
Okay. We have a few minutes left. There are no questions yet in the Q&A section. I do have a couple
that's the dream.
No. But there are a couple of questions that have come through. I'd actually like to ask Joy, but also Simon, whether the guide has influenced how you collect data during your trials. Has it, in, particularly around the economics, or whether you're thinking about needing to think about the risks and rewards more? Has it had any influence, do you think?
I'm happy to go first. Most definitely, and this was a big thing for us over the project. It's understanding that the economic section is really important, and so often we get to the end of a project and we'd like to do an economic analysis, but during the breadth of the project we haven't collected the right data, so the right numbers, that the costs of things, and so the writing guide and going through this project in general highlighted, if not more so than we already knew, the importance of that economic section. And so from that point onwards, we're collecting and trying to do partial or at least economic analyses on each of our projects that we do now, because we understand the usefulness of it and how useful it is for farmers. And previously, I know it's a tough ask, but even we can do high level and simple kind of work that's of immense benefit to farmers, even if it's not like a hardcore economic analysis. It's just some of those real simple dollars and cents that we weren't collecting before that we can do now, that farmers really appreciate.
So just want to kind of echo what Simon was saying there as well. It did help us to identify what gaps we had with collecting information. We certainly had some gaps for the economic analysis side of things. But then what we also found was that we were able to look at the risk and reward of the impact and adoption side of things as well. So we've used these templates for community impact projects that are quite different from our usual trials and demonstrations. Thanks, Catherine.
Thank you. I had another question in the background for both of you, which was around changing and adapting the infographic. When you're sharing specific topics, does the format change depending on it? How much should we be guided by all the research that you've done that says this is a great format? How much do you twiddle depending on the topic?
I think it comes down to two considerations. One is if you've got someone that knows how to design a little bit easier, using Canva or so on and so forth. And so maybe if you don't have that skill at this point in time, or don't have that on your team, then you might emulate the exact format of what we've done in the writing guide. And there's enough detail in there to let you kind of follow that process and do it. And we do have some Canva templates and stuff set up for that as well. And then there's also at the end of the writing guide some notes, some useful tips on Canva and stuff to try and upskill people that aren't in on that space. And so there is some notes there to help out those that aren't used to it. But on the other side of that, it's not prescriptive. I think some of the other stuff that AREP have been doing as well looks different to the format that you've seen most today, where it's got all of those sections and a picture in the middle. They've changed it up a little bit as well, and we've certainly used it in the extension packages project by just maybe blocking out one section, and so just talking about the risks with a photo or something in one, and then maybe the rewards in another. And so you can take it out and block it and change it. It just depends on again those kind of questions that I put up about thinking about who that format is for and where it's going to be shared. And so you can the infographic is definitely changed and should be changed based on on your skill level and stuff with producing kind of graphic content rather than just written content.
Joy, did you want to add to that?
It does provide a certain amount of flexibility. We've used the same template this year purely for the fact that we want to keep a bit of consistency with the branding side of it. But seeing the other templates that other groups have developed has shown us that we can also make some improvements. But we're also going to be able to use it in our trial review book. So for the first time, we'll have the 1-page infographics, 4 pages, and the full report. So we can cater to all of our audiences in one go, which is fantastic.
It's awesome to hear, Joy. I also want to back up what Joy said there as well. It's like the it's that the oh, apologies. I've just had a complete brain blank there. But what I will do is I see that is Owen McCarthy's put a question into the chat. Do you mind if I answer that?
Very quickly, we need to wrap up.
Okay, sorry, Owen, this one's for
Arthur.
you last minute. Owen's asked, what would you say? Would you say context is the first thing farmers tend to look for when first reading a trial report? And I'd say yes. In our first set of user testing, we didn't actually provide the context section. It wasn't in there, and farmers straight away they asked, like, what was the rainfall? What's the soil type? They wanted to see that context straight away because that was an anchor for them to be like, yes, I understand this suits one of my paddocks or it suits my property straight away. So yeah, really think that context is incredibly important in that space. And I've remembered what I was supposed to say to Joy's comment, and that is Joy noted consistency. And I think that's a really big thing that the guide can promote and produce as well, and it's really important. It's like if you see the same format or you see that infograph multiple times, you understand where you need to go to on it to find what you're looking for straight away. And I think the seafood team have done a really good job in that sense where they've utilized the same format. And so their growers, they know if they want to find the risks and rewards, they're there. If they want to find the context, they know it's up in the left-hand side. They've got that real good consistency going. So I think that's a key strength as well.
Okay. I think that's a great note to end on, the consistency plus flexibility. I'd just like to finish up today's webinar, but also the 3 webinars. So we've had 3 in the program 1 thread over the last 3 weeks. Some of you have come to all of them, and I see comments that say thank you for all of them. They are all available. You can go back to them, whether you've seen them before or would like to check up. We looked at knowledge sharing for good soil stewardship, a good look at the social benchmarking surveys to understand what drives farmer decisions, and today's new reporting tool for impact. Thank you to everyone who's come to one or more or all of the webinars, or if you're looking at them in the recordings, thank you for your time. Do follow up with any of the speakers or any of us if you need any more information. On the way out, please complete the post-webinar survey. It helps us know what we should be providing in the future as far as information goes. Thank you, Simon. Thank you, Joy. Thank you, Felicity and Olivia, for organising all this. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, guys. Much appreciated.
Thanks, Catherine. Thanks, everyone. See you later.